the rules are really asymmetric, right? In the sense that founders will typically pitch a VC many times in their lives, maybe, but they do very few deals in their lives, right? A founder might do 3-4 deals in his entire life if he's a serial entrepreneur. A VC, on the other hand, or a very prolific angel investor might be doing 10, 20 deals a year, who the hell knows, right? And so they are much, much more experienced at this whole post-pitch negotiation game, right, that happens. So founders have very little information, they have very little experience in general, and so there's this asymmetry, information asymmetry, right, of how you kind of approach your VC post a pitch. So, how do you overcome that? I think you have to talk to other founders who've done it before, people who've built companies, who've raised rounds from VCs, who've raised rounds from other investors, angel investors, and others, to understand how they did it. What is the norm? What is the expectation? What is normal? What is what kind of terms should you give on? What kind of terms should you actually negotiate, right? That's a very important aspect, and the only way for a first-time founder to learn that is to talk to others, right? It won't even come through just by hiring lawyers and professional advisors. It's really, you need to talk to other founders who've been in the same shoes as you, and mentors who are willing to walk you through the process, who you trust, right? Once you've pitched to VC, there's only two routes that'll happen, right? They're either interested or they're not interested. And if they're interested, you'll find that they take a certain path. But if you start to get things like, call us back when you have some traction, call us in 6 months when you've launched, how about we introduce you to somebody else, tell us when you've made more progress, you filed that patent, is really subtle ways of saying we're not really interested, right, at this point. And don't take it personally. It's just business, They obviously are looking at lots and lots of plans every week, and they simply cannot fund every plan. And, so rejection is really part of the process, and you should understand it as such, right? And not take it personally, but just learn to if they're willing to give you some feedback, ask for it, and try and incorporate it if it's relevant. But you don't have to zig and zag for every piece of feedback you get from every rejection. Just take it into account so you can approach your next rev or your next pitch or your next iteration of your pitch with a Gestalt approach to things, right? Which is you take the holistic set of feedback you got and said, hey, I heard this pattern from 8 different investors. They're not investing because they either think the market is too small, or they think the team is incomplete, or they think essentially I need too much money to execute this, or they think the engineering, the prototype I built is unimpressive, right? Those are basically 4 reasons why people reject in general. And try and figure out which of those it is. If it's multiple of them, you're in trouble. If it's only one of those, maybe it's fixable, and you can go back and address it, right? So don't obsess about it and go on to the next target and keep pitching. When an investor likes you, the messages you'll get are very different. What you'll be asked is, can you meet with the CEO of my portfolio company? I'd like you to meet with XYZ, right? And could you meet with them in the next week or 10 days? Could you come back in and we want to meet with the rest of your team? Or we want to meet with a couple of your customers. Or we want you to take the product and maybe install it at this customer site where we have a good contact at and we'd like to get some feedback, right? Or they'd say, can you come back in for a full pitch with the partners, right? And that's the basic signals that, they're kind of in love with you. They'd like to maybe go to the next stage, at least to understand whether this is a viable opportunity for them or not. And I think in those circumstances, don't get too excited because it's not a done deal yet. It's not a slam dunk, but it's more than likely you've at least got past that first hurdle, right? Of the initial filter that they apply to deals. It's a promising sign that you did either a good pitch, or they're very interested in the space, or they like the team, or they like your approach to basically this opportunity, right? The first thing I do is not hurry up and get it all excited and try and accelerate the process and bug the investor with a call every morning and asking when they're going to make a decision or whatever. I think you've got to give it its time. Investment cycles often take several months to actually come to fruition. So play it cool, their love, if they like you, it won't just evaporate overnight. They're rational beings, right? And they've got a thesis to how they're investing. They've got a certain mindset that just won't change in a flip, right? And so, go ahead and engage with them, but play it cool and not try to rush it. And the last thing I say is, finally, when they're ready to give you terms, try and articulate it in writing, either in emails. So there's lack of, there's no chance of miscommunication, right? That's very important. So try and get a term sheet in writing that kind of articulates all the points, and then you can go from that to a final set of documentation. It can range anywhere from a few weeks to several months, and you've got to be prepared for that. So let me just walk you through a timeline from the start to finish, right? Initially, you'll have the introductory phase where you get introduced to a VC or you meet them somehow. Essentially here in this phase, personal referrals are the most preferred route to enter a VC or enter an investor, where you're being referred to them by somebody they trust, either a portfolio CEO or VP of engineering or marketing at that portfolio company, or another founder that they have worked with in the past, somebody in their network that they trust, right? That's a very important aspect. The next thing that you'll do is you'll basically have a series of internal pitches. Probably the first pitch will be with an associate or a senior member of the investment team. And if they like you, then they'll bring you in for a group pitch, which is the pitch to the membership of their investment group, right? And that's typically the partners of the firm. And it's at that time that if you actually are talking to others, that you should also try and get more kind of acceleration of the other parts as well, right? If you're successful at the end of that group pitch, at the end of the partner meeting, you will essentially end up with a term sheet. So once you've had a successful partner meeting, the negotiation will start if the investor is interested, right? And they will probably start with some verbal, understanding of what your expectations are. They would ask you what valuation expectations you have. They'd start to drill into what kind of funding you're really looking for and what are the use of those funds. They'll start to kind of outline more seriously the milestones, and they'll try to essentially split out the funding by tranches that match those milestones, right? And so that will give a framework to how the deal might get constructed, and then that will result in essentially a term sheet at the end of that process, right? During that process as well, you can ask the investor if they'd like to syndicate with others, if you've got other investors who are interested, other angels who are interested, so that you can have them co-invest in the deal. Oftentimes, for the founder, it's actually quite beneficial to have multiple investors at the table. No one firm, no one partner is dominant. But you don't want to split it out too big either, because then you have nobody who's actually fundamentally interested in you either, because everybody's got a very small minor stake. So don't overdo the syndication bit as well. So at some point you will receive a formal term sheet, and that will be a formal document. Now please understand that that's almost always a non-binding